Hello friends, welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen. Today we're going to make my version of a Southern meatloaf. So what you see on my counter is what we're going to use to make this meatloaf. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, meatloaf. No, this is really a great meatloaf and it has such a great flavor. You know, it's one of those things where when I was growing up, my mother used to make meatloaf, and I remember walking through the house and you could smell that meatloaf cooking and you were like, oh god, it's meatloaf. Well, yeah, that's probably why as I got older I actually started working with the meatloaf, trying to make it more tasty and original and a lot better taste than, old school meatloaf, which there really wasn't a lot in old school meatloaf. They didn't put a lot in to kick up the flavor. And that's why when I worked with this, over the years I added things, changed things, got help and hints from other people, and came up with something I thought was pretty good. I mean, it has such a kick and flavor, but it isn't just like plain old meatloaf with no taste. This has a kick of peppers and taste from tomato and taste from sugar, and it just kind of gives it that great taste that you want to eat this. And I have to say, when I made this the other day, I just really loved the meatloaf. It was one of those things where, I'd been eating so much of the same thing over and over to where I got to this, I just loved it again. So what we're going to do is take 20 saltine crackers. We're going to break them up a bit into a bowl because we want to make sure that we get these, broken up to where they can soak in the beef broth before we pour it into it. So go ahead and break them up and just do the best you can at getting them split in two or whatever. And then into this, we're going to add a half a cup of beef broth. And we're going to set this to the side for 5 minutes and let it soak in the beef broth. So that way when you go to put this into your ground beef, it's going to punch the flavor and give it more of a taste. So in a large bowl, we have 1 pound of ground beef and we have added 1 large egg. And then we're going to bring those crackers in, this is 5 minutes later, and add them into the bowl with the rest of it. And then to this, we're adding a half a cup of a mix of green and red bell peppers that have been cut up into small pieces. Then we're adding 3/4 teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of black pepper, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Now all this together is going to make this ground beef have so much flavor in it. It's going to be amazing because it's going to punch up what could be bland and give it life. And that's the best thing about it, is you don't want this just to be like ground beef that's just been cooked. You want it to have flavor. So what we're going to do, and yes, you are going to have to use your hand to do this, is to go through and mix this all in this large bowl. So keep pushing it through until you break up the crackers or you add in the peppers and you make sure all the seasoning is mixing throughout. When you're breaking up the crackers, if there are some pieces in there that just, they're still solid pieces of cracker, it doesn't matter, they're going to cook in. And the same thing with all the other pieces, like everything just needs to be mixed through the ground beef, because as it cooks, it's going to cook in and cook into flavor, but also it's going to become a big loaf, which is what you want it to do. So just keep going by hand with this until you feel everything has been mixed all the way into the ground beef. It's pretty obvious when you get to the point where you should stop, because you're going to see that everything is pretty much sticking together in a big loaf. When we get ready to do this in the oven, we're going to put a topping on it, and we're going to mix that up in just a minute. But the topping does not go on once this goes in the pan. The topping is going to be added later on during the cooking time. So that way it's just not going to like scorch what we put on top of it. Because if you put on something that's tomatoey and left it in there for a whole hour, the top of it would get pretty bad. So what I do with mine is I have like a glass dish I'm going to bake this in, and I'm going to coat it with aluminum foil and some cooking spray just to make sure I don't have a mess to clean up later. The pan that I'm using, I think it's something like around 8 inches by 8 inches. This is like a little square pan. And then put the meatloaf into this and shape it to the size of what you're cooking in, whether you have a different size than what I'm using or whatever. And just push it all out to the side so we make sure that this is all into the pan and ready to roll when we are ready to roll. Because the next thing we're going to do is mix up our topping, but we're going to set it aside until we're ready for it. Now in the topping, we're going to use some brown sugar, some ketchup, and some chili sauce. The chili sauce is going to give this such a kick, and then the brown sugar is going to flavor it. So we have in here 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/4 of a cup of ketchup, and 1/4 of a cup of chili sauce. And we're going to put them all together and mix them up. And when we mix this up, this is just going to have the best flavor that you can imagine, because when this meatloaf is cooked, this is going to be so wickedly cool. So when we bake this, we are baking at a temperature of 350 degrees for anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour. And you're just going to have to make sure you check it to get to the point where it's done. Usually around 50 to 55 minutes, this is cooked. But to put this topping on, you're going to have to pull it out around 40 minutes after it's been baking, add the topping to it, and then put it back into the oven. So we're not putting the sauce on top of this until it's baked for at least 40 minutes. And then, you know, once it's back in there, you're going to give it the 10 to 15 minutes it needs to be finished, and then it's going to come out. So go ahead, once it's been in your oven, to look like this when it comes back, and spoon the sauce over top of this. I'll try to keep the sauce on top and not let it run down all over the sides or whatever, because it's just a kick to have that right on the very top of the meatloaf, because it is such a great flavor. So just go ahead and take a spoon and smooth it all around the top, go to the edges, and make sure it's coated. And then, like I said, this goes back in the oven again for 15 minutes maybe. And when it's done, it looks something like this. And I served mine with some honey butter cornbread, which I also have another video for, so I'll leave a link below. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you get a chance, check out my cookbooks, which are available in bookstores worldwide. The first is about everyday cooking. The second is all about baking. Have a great day.